Hello and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get straight into our weather. We don't have any watches, warnings, or advisories in effect for the next 24 hours or so, but we certainly do have some fire danger over the interior. Extreme, high to extreme fire danger stretching all the way from the Yukon Flats and even some points east to the border with Canada, south of there across the Yukon River down into the Fairbanks area, and even a little bit southwest from Fairbanks. I know we do have some fires going in that area as well, so definitely something to be aware of, and make sure that you're checking with local authorities about any burn restrictions before doing any burning. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we can see our weak low pressure system in the Gulf still spinning there, been there for a couple of days, going to be there for a couple more days. We can also see another weak low pressure system spinning in the Bering just north of the Aleutians, that's north of Adak there. But maybe our big weather story is a lack of weather across the west coast where we have high pressure in command. So should be plenty of sun for the west coast except for some fog in the coastal areas. And if we look at the northern part of the state, we can see that kind of line of clouds stretching across the Brooks Range. That is going to be a front coming into the area. So if we look at our surface chart for today, we sure enough see that front stretching all the way from the Chukchi Sea across the central interior and into western Canada. That's going to be bringing just enough forcing with it for some afternoon and evening thunderstorms on the south side of the eastern Brooks Range in the Yukon Flats area. Elsewhere across the state, that weak low in the Gulf is going to be bringing some showers into the Gulf Coast area, stretching all the way up to about the Alaska Range. And even though we have some high pressure in command for the southern panhandle, we'll continue to see some showers for the panhandle today. But as we discussed, we've got that high pressure over the southeastern Bering, so should be plenty of sun for today along the west coast, with the exception of some fog for the immediate coastal areas. Heading into tonight, that cold front is going to stall out and become a stationary front. Still there though, still bringing that forcing just enough for some continuing chance of thunderstorms for that same area near the Yukon Flats overnight tonight. Also looking at continuing showers for tonight for the Panhandle as well as the Alaska Range, and some rain for the Aleutians, with more fog developing for the west coast coastal sections. For Wednesday, that stationary front is going to dissipate, but we'll still, with that weak low over the eastern interior, we'll still have enough forcing for some thunderstorms for Wednesday afternoon from the eastern interior around the Eagle area, stretching west across the Yukon River and into the western interior just south of the Brooks Range. Also looking at some continued showers for the southeast portion of the mainland, with snow at the highest elevations in the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains, and some continuing showers for the Panhandle, but we will see some sun breaks, which is a little bit of an improvement over the last few days. Finally, for Thursday, we're looking at weak low pressure over the Prince William Sound area, bringing some showers there, as well as shifting that chance for thunderstorms even further south to just north of the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains. Showers, another day for shower potential across the Panhandle, but possibly some dry conditions on Thursday in the area of Juneau. Maybe still some clouds, but also could see some sun breaks in those dry areas. Temperatures for Wednesday morning across the south and southeast portions of the state, we're looking at pretty much upper 40s to low 50s across the board. We got 52 there at Anchorage, 50 at Juneau, and 51 for Haines Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, a cool summer day for the Panhandle and South Central, like we've been seeing, with temperatures in the low 60s, some mid 60s, with 63 there at Seward, and our warmest temperatures for the Alaska Peninsula was 69 there at King Salmon. For Thursday morning, much of the same with upper 40s and low 50s. So if we look at Thursday afternoon, a cool day in the Panhandle, even a little bit cooler than Wednesday, with temperatures struggling to reach 60, especially closer to the Gulf that you get, but a little bit inland and you get temperatures in the 60s with 61 again there at Juneau. Warming for South Central though, with Anchorage looking to eke out 70 degrees and even some mid 70s for the Mat-Su on Thursday. For the northern half of the state, cool temperatures Wednesday morning for the North Slope. Utqiagvik there right at freezing, 32 degrees. Much warmer as usual across the interior, with 59 there at Fairbanks being the warm spot. And then somewhere in between for the West Coast, with temperatures in the 40s, 48 there at Nome, 42 at Wales. Wednesday afternoon, cool again during the day on the North Slope, with temperatures in the 40s. We do have some mid 70s across the interior, with a 76 there at Galena, looking like the warm spot on the map. And cool, especially for the immediate coast of the West Coast, with 48 there at Wales for Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, very similar, 30s for the North Slope, mid 50s for the interior, and 40s for the West Coast. If we look at Thursday afternoon, a couple of degrees cooler in the interior, but the bigger story is much warmer conditions along the North Slope, with temperatures reaching all the way up to about 50 degrees. Switching to the southwest portion of the state for Wednesday morning, we're looking at more lows in the upper 40s to low 50s. For Wednesday afternoon, cool for the YK Delta in the mid 50s, and warmer for the interior of Southwest, with 68 there at Dillingham, and warming as we head up even the Yukon River into the interior. For Thursday morning, once again, we're looking at lows in the upper 40s to low 50s. We've got 45 there at Macoriac, 50 at Bethel, 52 at Dillingham. So not much change from what we're expecting on Wednesday morning. But then on Thursday afternoon, we are looking at maybe a couple of degrees cooler across the interior of Southwest, 65 there at Bethel. We've got 69 at Dillingham. Still some 70s for the easternmost area of the Alaska Peninsula, with 71 there at King Salmon, 73 at Iliamna. And then looking at 40s out into the, 50s, that should be 50s out into the Aleutians on Thursday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to a look at your aviation weather. For Wednesday morning, we have IFR conditions along a lot of the coastal areas from the west coast down to the Bristol Bay coast, out through much of the Aleutians and portions of the Gulf Coast, including Kodiak Island and up into Yakutat. Also some IFR conditions for the southern panhandle as well as the North Slope for Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, we do have a front that's going to be sliding down into the interior. We've got some thunderstorms for the afternoon out ahead of that front in the Yukon Flats area, down almost into Fairbanks, as well as the eastern interior. We have some improvement in conditions, though, for the Bristol Bay coast, as well as the Kodiak Island area, where we're looking at VFR or MVFR conditions. Lots of VFR around the interior, though, for Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, IFR conditions returning to much of the west coast, including the Norton Sound area, as well as Bristol Bay. IFR conditions developing in the Prince William Sound area, stretching across the Gulf Coast to Yakutat. We've also got IFR conditions in the Aleutians and MVFR for pretty much all of the Panhandle for Thursday morning. Thursday afternoon, we do see some improvement in the Panhandle to VFR and across the Alaska Peninsula to at least MVFR conditions. VFR over most of the mainland, including the North Slope, but once again, we do have some thunderstorm chances for Thursday afternoon. Those are going to be shifting even further south to over the Wrangell St. Elias Mountains, as well as the Mat-Su Valley. Taking a look at our pass conditions on Wednesday, Anaktuvik Pass VFR, as well as Adigan Pass also VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill passes both MVFR in the morning, but improving to VFR on Wednesday afternoon. Same idea at Rainy Pass, MVFR in the morning, improving to VFR in the afternoon. And Windy Pass also starting MVFR and improving to VFR. Isabel Pass going the opposite direction, starting MVFR on Wednesday morning and deteriorating some to MVFR on Wednesday afternoon. Sorry, that should be starting VFR and deteriorating to MVFR. Also at Mentasta Pass, starting out VFR, but MVFR during the afternoon hours. Tanita Pass, we're flipping again, starting the day at MVFR and improving to VFR on Wednesday afternoon. Portage Pass also starting the day MVFR and improving to VFR. And Chilcoot and White Pass is both expected to be MVFR throughout the day on Wednesday. For our freezing level, we've got our coldest air as usual over the northern part of the state, 2,000 foot freezing levels over the Beaufort Sea, increasing pretty quickly over the North Slope, and then 10,000 feet across much of the interior mainland. We've got 12,000 feet over the West Coast, and then another relative low of freezing levels, about 6,000 feet over the northern Panhandle and northeastern Gulf, getting higher out from there out to about 12,000 feet as we head out into the Gulf of Alaska. For icing on Wednesday, just one area of isolated moderate icing impacting the northern Gulf Coast from the eastern Kenai through Prince William Sound over to about Yakutat, and then stretching south into the Gulf. That's going to be above about 9,000 feet, that isolated moderate icing on Wednesday. Jet stream winds. Jet stream is really generally south of the area. So we're seeing a lot of increased winds at the jet stream level, but nothing really as far as an actual jet is concerned. Just some weak indications with 65 to 75 knot winds across a lot of the area. Looking at 9,000 feet, also not a whole lot of wind to speak of here. Not much of anything above 20 knots for the entire southwest of the state, including the Aleutians. We do have some peaks of 20, maybe as high as 30 knots out of the north and northwest across the northern side of the mainland, and then mostly about 10 knots, maybe as high as 20 knots out of the south and southwest for the Panhandle. Taking a look at 3,000 foot winds, even lower this low in the atmosphere. We've got general low pressure over the interior, bringing winds of anywhere from 5 to about 15 knots, but generally light winds. Finally, some turbulence below 4,000 feet, considerable moderate turbulence, both north of the Alaska range up to about the Yukon Flats, and for the Gulf Coast, the northern Gulf Coast from Prince William Sound eastward to about Yakutat.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact and the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to to get boats, larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast. Starting with the sea ice edge, we continue to see the ice melt back to the north in the Chukchi Sea, as well as it becoming thinner and less concentrated in just the immediate coastal sections of the Beaufort Sea, right up against Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, and those areas. We're starting to see less than 80% concentration of ice right up against the coast. Expect those trends to continue over the next couple of weeks at least. Taking a look at our marine forecast for Wednesday for the southeast waters, we're looking at generally southerly flow, 10 to 15 knots for the Gulf and 10 to 20 knots for the inside channels, so pretty light winds. We're also looking at small seas 3 to 4 feet across the board. Taking a look into Thursday, a little bit of a shift in the winds to out of the north and northeast, at least for the northern side of the Gulf, 10 to 15 knots, increasing winds around 20 knots for the southeast Gulf, as well as those southern inside channels out of the southeast at about 20 knots. 10 to 15 knot winds elsewhere. Seas coming up just a little bit in that southern Gulf to about 5 feet. For South Central, we've got light winds in the Gulf, just 10 knots, even some variable winds across much of the Gulf with seas just around 4 feet. Strongest winds in the Cook Inlet, with about 20 knots out of the south and southwest, and seas up to about 5 feet. Heading into Thursday, we do see a little bit of an increase in the winds to around 20 knots near the Barren Islands, as well as on the Gulf side of the Barrens. That's going to be out of the west and northwest. Still 10 to 15 knots for the rest of the Gulf, and winds decreasing to around 10 knots in Cook Inlet on Thursday. For Wednesday, for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, light winds once again here with 10 to 15 knots. Some variable winds. Where it's not variable, we're looking at northerly and westerly flow. Seas also relatively low, 2 feet on the Bering Sea side and just 4 to 5 feet on the Gulf side of the peninsula. Heading into Thursday, we see a slight increase in winds, but still pretty light, below small craft advisory criteria. Winds more consistently out of the west, 15 to 20 knots. Seas coming up about a foot across the board, so 2 to 3 feet for the Bering side of the peninsula and 5 to 6 feet for the Gulf side. For the Aleutians, we're seeing light winds again on Wednesday, another day with no small craft winds for the Aleutians, 10 to 15 knot winds out of the southwest for the western Aleutians and more variable for the central and eastern Aleutians. And then a little bit of an uptick, particularly for the western Aleutians in winds as we head into Thursday. Southerly winds 25 knots. That's going to be out ahead of our next system. Seas also building a little bit for the western Aleutians, 6 to 10 feet so coming up rather quickly ahead of that next storm. For Wednesday along the west coast, light winds here once again, so a couple of days in a row now of light winds along the west coast, generally out of the southwest, 10 to 15 knots and 2 to 4 foot seas. As we look ahead into Thursday, those winds come up just a little bit. We've got 15 knots out of the west in Norton Sound, 20 knots out of the south and southwest out into the Bering away from the coast, still seas in the 2 to 6 foot range. And for the Arctic coast, we've got winds out of the northwest for the Beaufort Sea, 10 to 20 knots, and around 20 knots of wind out of the east for the Chukchi Sea, coming out of the due south at 20 knots just on the north side of the Bering Strait. Heading into Thursday, we've got winds switching to out of the southeast and east for the north slope over the Beaufort Sea, 15 to 20 knots, so increasing there a little bit. Also increasing over the Chukchi Sea, 20 to 25 knots out of the south and southeast. And recapping with our surface charts, we have a weak low pressure system continuing to spin in the Gulf of Alaska, bringing showers to the Gulf Coast as well as the Panhandle tonight. Thunderstorms possible over the northeastern interior, Yukon Flats, eastward to the Canadian border. And then Wednesday, continuing thunderstorm chances, but shifting a little bit further south to around the Yukon River there with that low pressure system. Some more showers in the Panhandle, but also some chance for sunbreaks. And we'll see some sunbreaks on the west coast as well with high pressure in command. If you're not seeing sun, it's just because of a little bit of fog. Thanks so much for joining us today.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.